Week 1 of the NFL, Week 2 of college football, a lot to unwrap. Let's dig into it. Where to start? I don't know. It's almost just like close your eyes and just throw a dart, and where it sticks, we'll just go from there. Welcome into the Week 1 reaction, overreaction show. NFL, we still got one game left tonight, Seattle-Denver. Been on vacation the last few days, so I had some time to put this together here this afternoon. So, welcome into the Seagate Blitz podcast. And if you're into fantasy football, college fantasy, college football, I'm sure, just like me, you were glued to your TV or your devices of whatever you were doing, watching some of the games, getting some of the scores and stats for your fantasy teams, or if you're just an NFL fan in general. What a treat we were gifted in the 1 o'clock games yesterday. And I'll get to that here in a little bit. But first I want to start with my college quick hit. And I want to start with something that is not really earth-shattering news, but we saw it coming. But
here's what we know.
By now, you've probably heard Scott Frost has been dismissed from his head coaching duties at the University of Nebraska. Now, I put it out on social media after the loss to Georgia Southern the other day, and I was just joking, but I knew it was coming. So I didn't know for sure, but I knew for sure. You can't lose that game and keep your job, especially not with the history that has been there since he was at Nebraska. So when you lose to Georgia Southern after just one bad event after another in Nebraska, you're going to be gone. Scott Frost out. I'm reading that Matt Campbell, who is the current head coach of Iowa State, is intrigued by that job opening. Almost like his time at Iowa State has ran its course. And you know, he was a real hot name a few years ago. FSU had interviewed him, and they wanted him before they hired Mike Norvell once Taggart was fired. But he had just signed a big, long deal. I think that would be a good hire if they could actually pull him away from Iowa State. He could go there and get that program maybe back on track, because it hasn't been, good for as long as we can remember, back in the Tommy Frazier days. And Scott Frost. Scott Frost was a fantastic quarterback for Nebraska. Heisman Trophy winner, if I remember correctly. So, we was all thinking when he left UCF, that's a great fit. He's going back to his school, and he's going to get that. He's going to get it right. And for a minute, it looked like he was going to. But for whatever reason, and then the play call last week, it was just so bizarre, and you knew that it was just he was in over his head. I don't remember the specifics of the play call, but hearing about it and watching it, I was like, man, that guy is in over his head, and he's barely treading water. And then when you give up 400 yards to Kyle Van Treese, 400 yards. You give up 400 passing yards to Georgia Southern's quarterback. Now, he did only throw one touchdown, but he threw all over Nebraska's defense. Yeah, and when I saw that they had upset Nebraska, I said, yep, Nebraska's now accepting job applications for the title of head coach. Scott Frost out. Who's in to be determined. It would be interesting to see Matt Campbell leave Iowa State and go there, but is he going to leave in the middle? I mean, not the middle. Is he going to leave at the beginning of the college season? I don't think so. He leaves now, Iowa State falls apart. They'll have players jumping ship like crazy. It's a mess in Nebraska. It really is. A couple more games I want to talk about on my college quick hit, and then we'll get into the NFL Week 1. Texas, Alabama, if you didn't watch that game stole the show Saturday. Noon kick, and had it not been, and you can say what ifs and what ifs all you want, had it not been Quinn Ewers getting hurt in the first quarter, Alabama may have suffered a loss. When Hudson Card came in, the team just looked a little bit different. Now you're stacking the box. Bijan Robinson, who wasn't running fantastic, and we kind of knew that he wasn't going to run fantastic because it's Alabama, for crying out loud. We knew it was going to be a dogfight, and I thought for sure that Texas was going to get smoked, and the whole entire country was wrong. I don't know anybody other than, Austin thought they had a chance. I didn't. I thought they're not ready. They're way too young. They're not gelled. But they handled everything Alabama threw at them. And they really caused Alabama to play outside of what they're used to playing. Alabama had 100 yards in penalties. That doesn't happen. And everybody wants to talk about the play in the end zone. Well, let's talk about that for a minute before I get on to Marshall Notre Dame. The play in the end zone was so bizarre. Bryce Young gets caught in the end zone, gets tackled, looks like it's a safety. To me, it's still a safety. But not only do they not call the safety, they call targeting and another penalty. I can't remember what it was now. Roughing the passer or something. Yeah, roughing the passer with targeting. Crazy call. Now, they end up reversing it and getting it right as far as it. He wasn't even down on the ground yet, so it couldn't have been roughing the passer. There was no targeting because the Texas guy's shoulder went into his chest. And when you saw it from different angles, you realize, okay, they've got to get this fixed. And they did. The only problem was it should have been a safety, too. Because eventually, if you let the play run through, he's going to get tackled. And if he throws the ball, well, that's intentional grounding, and it's a safety because it's happened in the end zone. So everybody's clamoring on social media that Texas got screwed, when in actuality, Alabama had like 12 or 14 penalties for 100 yards. They didn't help their cause. That one play stunk for Texas, but it didn't make or break the game. But I'm going to tell you, if this is what we have to look forward to from the University of Texas, and I'm going to toot my own horn just for a minute. If you go back to when it was really cold outside, back in February and March, and I'm doing a podcast here and there, sprinkling them in, and I said, I want all that Texas smoke. That's what I'm talking about. Give me all that Texas smoke. Because if they're going to get it right this early against Bama and look that good, they're only a couple of steps away from being really good in college football. Now, the bad news is they did lose Quinn Ewers for somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 to 8 weeks with some kind of a clavicle injury. And that stunk because he went down, he got planted on his non-throwing shoulder, and you knew right away something wasn't right. He got up, you could tell he was mad, he's all aggravated that he got hurt, and who wouldn't have been? We was all, that game was fantastic. Best game of the weekend. Now you can say Texas, or you can say Kentucky, Florida. No, I'm a Seminole fan, diehard, through and through. So you're never going to hear me say too much good about Florida. That being said, Florida is one play away from being 0-2. So overhyped is what I'm getting there. Kentucky should have handled that game the way that they really did. So I'm not really going into detail on that one because, to me, the throw in the end zone by Cam Rising last week resulted in an interception. If that's a touchdown, Florida's 0-2. I don't know how in the world they ended up with a 12 ranking. What planet do you go to get to number 12? I mean, I know that you beat Notre Dame, or not Notre Dame, excuse me. I know that you beat Utah, but, I mean, Utah was top 5, but, you jump all the way to 12? Nah, not. It's hard to convince me of that ranking. That ranking to me was bizarre. But Texas Bama stole the show. But a couple upsets of the week and a couple upsets that are big in recent history. Marshall knocks off Notre Dame. And I said this on my Facebook page, and I know it aggravates Notre Dame people, but when was the last time Notre Dame was good? I mean, think about it. Now, they've had some good seasons, 8, 9, 10-win seasons, sure. They've been in some bowl games. Okay, but when were they really championship-relevant contenders? I take you back somewhere around 2011, 12 maybe, when they was playing Alabama in the national championship and just got embarrassed. That was back when the whole Manti Te'o real girlfriend, fake girlfriend thing was going on, and they just got smoked. Other than that, they haven't been good, like championship contender good, since Bettis was there back in the 90s. And I say that with full confidence. And a good friend of mine, a big Notre Dame fan, I said it's facts. He said it's an opinion. No, it's a bad opinion if you're a Notre Dame fan. It aggravates Notre Dame fans, but if you really think about it, that's where we're at. So, what do we have? We have a head coach in Marshall who used to coach under who? Nick Saban. Yeah, goes into Marshall and Huntington and gets this thing straightened out. And they're on the upswing. They lost Rasheen Ali. They plug right in with Kalen LeBourne. Former 5-star recruit for FSU, left, had some off-the-field issues at FSU, left, goes in. They insert him right in. He had the most rushing yards, I think. It's either the most rushing yards in a game for Marshall ever or the most back-to-back or two-game rushing yardage for his 2 starts at running back. So they've got it going on. They've got a solid running game to rely on, even with Rasheen Ali being hurt. Marshall is on the upswing. We're going to see, in the not-so-distant future, Marshall is going to be relevant and winning ball games again, and I'm all for it. I love that program. I'm a Florida State fan. I'm a West Virginia Mountaineer fan because that's where Bowden coached. But I always find myself rooting for Marshall just because of what they went through back even before I was born. When the plane wreck killed a whole entire football team, I still believe in We Are Marshall. I love to see that. Notre Dame's overrated. They always are overrated, overranked. And Marshall beats them, upsets them. And good for Marshall. Good for that program. I enjoyed watching that. Texas A&M, App State. Okay, this was probably the one that stunned us all. It stunned me. Didn't see this one coming at all. Okay, after they went 63-61 with North Carolina the week before, they turned around and beat Texas A&M. I don't know. I didn't watch all this game. It's impossible for me to watch every college game. Anybody who says they do is just wrong. Because it's impossible to watch every game. I can't. I'm always flipping around constantly, and I watched a little bit of the game because I've got Devon A-Chain in one of my college leagues, so I'm always kind of keeping an eye on what he's doing and stuff. But when it came down to it, at the end of the game, App State wanted it more and won the game. This was a big loss for Jimbo Fisher and the Aggies. Okay, not only were they ranked in the top 10, this is going to hurt them. Now they're going to have to really climb. They can't lose again. And losing to App State is just, you could lose to Alabama and it not kill your rankings. You lose to App State, who just went 63-61 with North Carolina, and North Carolina struggled this week as well, and you lose to them. That's not a good look for A&M. It's a good look for App State. I mean, Chase Bryce could be a solid quarterback. Keep my eye on that guy. It'd be interesting. I haven't seen the new rankings. I'm sure they're out. I haven't paid attention. I've been doing other stuff today. But so a big weekend in college football. And it's Monday. We turn back around and we fire it right back up on Thursday. There's probably a Thursday night game this week. And then Friday, FSU, Louisville. And then Saturday, we're right back in rolling again. So we are hitting, week 3 of the college football season, and we're off and rolling. Switching gears to the NFL. What in the world did we watch in week 1? We saw some good, we saw some bad, we saw a lot of ugly. And I'm going to start with the glaring, obvious elephant in the room, in the ugly room in Dallas. And I can report that Dak Prescott is probably out 6 to 8 weeks with a fractured thumb. I've had a fractured thumb before. They are no fun, and you cannot grip anything. Nothing at all. Hurt himself in the fourth quarter. Incidental contact with a defensive player from Tampa's hand, but at that point, I mean, for all intents and purposes, the game was over. I mean, it was probably over when Tampa went up 12-3. I mean, mathematically not, but if you watch the game, and in misery I did, they looked okay on the first drive, getting the ball, going down, scoring a field goal. And that's the extent of Dallas' scoring. It looked like crap after that. I thought both defenses played really well, Dallas's and Tampa Bay's. Micah Parsons played fantastic. I thought the corners held up relatively well. The safeties played good. The defensive line was not as dominant as I thought against an offensive line for Tampa that was a little beat up and missing a couple key pieces for the season. I thought they might do a little bit more. But I think all in all, Dallas' defense held their own. I mean, they held them to field goals. Until Mike Evans scored the touchdown, of course. But, a lot of problems in Dallas. Okay, and I was commenting on a post on Facebook a few hours ago that it starts at the top. And, I mean, this might just be the kick in the butt that everybody needs to get rid of Mike McCarthy. I don't know. I was never a McCarthy guy. When they brought him in, I was adamant about not liking the decision. I mean, I would have rather seen him kept Jason Garrett than let him go and hire Mike McCarthy. It's a bad hire from jump, and that's the hill I'm gonna die on. He's not a good coach, and a lot of factors go into play here. A lot of rust. A lot of guys not playing in preseason, and that's throughout the course of the NFL this week. We saw a lot of bad play because of big-name NFL players not playing one snap in the preseason. Joe Burrow, for example, and I'll get to him here in a minute. I got 2 notes on Dallas and Cincinnati, and then we'll talk a little bit more week 1. But the problems in Dallas go to the top. Okay, was Amari Cooper really that important to that offense? Very well may have been. They were running the ball. They could move the ball. Zeke was getting 4 and 5 yards a pop. You know me, I'm not a Zeke guy. Zeke's getting 4 or 5 yards a pop, and they're moving the ball on the ground. Pollard was making some headway on the ground. They were moving the ball against that defense, running. And you knew he was going to have it tough because you only had CeeDee Lamb. Cooper's gone. Cedric Wilson's gone. The number 2, Michael Gallup, still recovering from ACL. Jalen Tolbert wasn't even active for this game, healthy scratch, because the other guy who they played, whose name I can't even think of right now, played better than him, and Noah Brown. I didn't see Simi Fioco on the field at all, and he was a college standout. So you've got one wide receiver and a tight end. You better run the ball. But instead, they run the ball. You get second and let's call it 5 or 6. Okay, and then you go to the air. Now you're looking at 3rd and 6. And now you have to pass. You're not getting anywhere. CeeDee Lamb had a couple of drops. It wasn't all his fault. They knew that they could just cover him and they was going to let somebody else hurt him. The running game was working and the defense was working. Stick with it. Yeah, it's going to be a boring game. Boring as heck. But you know what? You may have been able to keep yourself in it because your defense kept you in it. You may have been able to run the ball, sprinkle in some pass here and there because, the tight end and CeeDee Lamb had a decent day. Nothing spectacular, but they were okay, and they were getting you enough if you would have ran the ball more that they couldn't stack the box on you. So that's coaching. Go to the front office on personnel, letting your personnel go. Maybe Cooper was that important to that defense or to that offense. Maybe he was, the glue, and Lamb was the pop because they really missed him. They missed another option at the wide receiver position last night. And it's only going to get worse now because Dak's out 6 to 8 weeks. My final point with that is they cannot go forward in this season. It's one game. They cannot go forward in this season with Cooper Rush as their quarterback. They cannot, because they will go 1-16. They may find a way to win and beat maybe the Giants once, and maybe you get lucky against Washington. Maybe you get a couple of wins. But he's not that guy. So what do? I don't know. I'm not saying what they should or shouldn't do because I'm not a GM or an owner. But, Jimmy G wants out of San Fran. Who would want to do that job, take him to the Super Bowl, and then be a backup quarterback? They signed him for 1 year, trade for him, pick up that year contract, and let him play it out with you. Another option I was reading about was Cam Newton. I'm against that. I don't want no part of that either. He's done. He's toast. He's got nothing left in the tank. Unless you're just going to use him to just run, and in that case, whatever. But he can't throw the ball down the field. Hasn't been able to for a couple of years. So, they're going to have to do something because the quarterback that's going to win them some games isn't on that roster as we speak, September 12th. If you watch the Bengals game against the Pittsburgh Steelers, a very good game. That's like the game nobody wanted to win. Came down 20-20, down to the very last few moments in overtime before a field goal kicker finally was able to put one through the uprights and win the game. I'm not going to spend as much time on this as I did the Dallas game, but if you look at Joe Burrow's stat lines, he threw for 338 yards, 1 touchdown, 4 interceptions. 4 interceptions, and they still should have won the game a couple of times. Their long snapper was inactive for the game, and that caused them problems in the kicking game on more than one occasion. They could have won it in regulation, but he missed the extra point. Missed a field goal in overtime. Pittsburgh finally was able to get a hold of one when they missed one as well. I say all of that to say that they still, as ugly as that game was for Joe Burrow and the Bengals, they still scratched and clawed and found a way to almost win it. That's the difference in a team who's ready for the big time and a team like Dallas who will never be there again. And you say, Chris, you're a Cowboy fan. I am a Cowboy fan. I have been since I was born. It was weaving into my DNA by my dad and my grandma. But I still got to face the facts. Being a lifelong Cowboy fan gives me the permission to speak like this. They're never going to be good. with all the talent they've had throughout the course of the year since they won their last Super Bowl back when I was 2 years out of high school. It's been that long. They've had talent all over the place. A couple of years ago, you arguably say that's one of the best rosters that we've ever seen, and they couldn't get it done. Well, they go 13-3 in the regular season, went up to Lambeau, beat the pants off the Packers, and then the Packers beat them in the playoffs in their own home stadium. You want to know why? Because they could plan. Aaron Rodgers was able to figure out what they did defensively and make adjustments, and the second time around, he beat them. I'm not a Dak Prescott believer. He fooled me his rookie year. I've said that 100 times. I just don't think he's the guy. And I haven't for a long time. That tells me the Bengals are better coached, they're better prepared, and they are ready for the moment. Dallas wasn't ready for this moment. You can say all you want. You can say all you want. Burrow lost Higgins. Burrow lost Boyd. We'll see how they look going forward. They play Dallas this week. And sitting here right now, Dallas is going to get boat raced. I can say that with a lot of confidence. Because the Bengals are going to be ready for this game, even if Burrow only has a couple of wide receivers playing. They got the same thing. Bengals offensive line we thought was better. It might have been a little bit better. It's going to take some time to gel. Defense was pretty good. Running backs, Mixon, Zeke, wide receivers, Lamb. That's where the Bengals are going to have probably a little bit of an advantage. But if Higgins is out because he got blasted, now I seen Tyler Boyd limping around at the end of the game, so they may be down to it. Now it's just a matter of who wants to win this game more. And if I was putting money on it, I'd bet on Cincinnati. Moving along. I'm not a Packers fan, and I don't really, claim to really ever root for any of them other than Brett Favre. But Aaron Rodgers was very upset yesterday. Aaron Rodgers had nobody to throw the ball to, and Minnesota took advantage of that game, and Justin Jefferson went all kinds of crazy. And the Packers the torch may be getting sent to Minnesota for the next couple of years. They got a brand new head coach. He's a little bit more offensive minded, you could tell. They were rolling Kirk Cousins. He was stepping in and out of the pocket, moving him around to get the ball to Justin Jefferson. Now, I got a couple of shares of Justin Jefferson, so I like that. But to me, at some point you're going to have to rely on the run game a little bit more. Dalvin Cook had an okay game. Not what we expected. I don't think he even ended up with 90 yards. It was something like 85, no touchdowns. And they really didn't throw the ball much to anybody but Justin Jefferson. And if you're going to end up playing a team that can scheme to that, then you might struggle. But Green Bay had no answers, and Minnesota was able to roll them. If we go back to Thursday night, the Bills and the Rams kicked things off. I had assumed that the Bills would win. They just seem like the team that's ready to just, take flight. And this could very well be their year if everything, if stars line up right and they stay healthy. This could be the one. This could be their time. And they showed it against Super Bowl champs, 31-10 on Thursday night. I thought that whole entire offense looked good. The defense was able to do some things. And, Cooper Kupp had a great game because he always does. But the running game, I don't know what's going on with Cam Akers. That, to me, is a mystery. Might give it one more week before I just, cut him. But the Bills looked good. The Rams looked okay. Maybe a little bit of a hangover. Not anything I wasn't expecting. I expected the Bills to win. I thought maybe it might have been a little bit higher score and closer. But, I thought the Bills would win, and they ended up winning. Chicago, San Francisco, 19-10, and what it looked like they were playing in a mud puddle. They were literally trying to just push water off the field. At one point, it was raining so hard you couldn't even see. Like the rain was coming down so hard, and the cameras, you couldn't even pick up what was going on in the game. Well, what was going on in the game was the Bears did just enough to slow down Trey Lance and win the game 19-10 in a game that, most would have thought San Fran would have handled. Now, the Bears, they're playing Lambeau. They're playing Green Bay next week, against a wounded Green Bay team. They may pull off another one. We may now have an issue as to where the 49ers don't want to get rid of Jimmy G, because they may give Lance a couple of weeks and say, yeah. But terrible weather. It's worth saying twice. So, a sloppy game. Bears, throughout the course of time, have always played pretty tough in sloppy games like that. So, let's give him a pass just this time, and we'll see how he does going forward. But Bears win a game, and they needed that win as a franchise. New coach in play there in Chicago, and that was a big win for Chicago. Saints-Falcons, this game was entertaining. Saints get the win 27-26. It looked as if, all hope was lost. And then all of a sudden, Jameis comes to life, throws a couple of touchdown passes, and hits Michael Thomas on a couple of them, I think. And the Saints just come roaring back and kind of a snoozer. This game was kind of a snoozer for a while. And it got interesting at the the last quarter. The game kind of took off and was interesting, and you're just kind of wondering who's going to come out on top. Alvin Kamara got dinged up in this game. They didn't really use him a lot, maybe because he was already hurt, and they were just trying to use him as a decoy and stuff. I don't really know. I'm very interested to see how Dennis Allen, the new head coach for the Saints, handles Alvin Kamara. They got to get him the ball more in the passing game. They can be so much more effective if they do that, and more dangerous as a team, because that's what really works for him. He's not going to get the ball 25 times, and run it down your throat. They need to get him the ball in space. And so we'll be interested to see just how it does going forward. I'm not giving up on Alvin Kamara yet, especially if he is dinged up. But, stock up for Jameis Winston and those receivers. But if that's what we're going to have in New Orleans, Alvin Kamara might not be such as the threat that he has been before. Eagles-Lions, the Lions tried to win this game, and the Eagles tried to let them. They kept it close, and then it was a blowout, and then all of a sudden, here come the Lions again. What we saw yesterday was Jalen Hurts settling in and throwing the ball a lot to A.J. Brown, and not very much to Devonta Smith. I was disappointed in that. It was no catches, 5 targets, obviously no yards for Devonta Smith. A.J. Brown had a big game. I don't know if they were just targeting him just to get him into the system and get him welcomed to the team. But I hate to say it's almost like the Justin Jefferson thing. If you get somebody who can cover and scheme against that, you're going to have to find another outlet receiver. And I think that's a great 1-2 punch. As much as I can't stay in Philadelphia, I think that's a fantastic 1-2 punch that Philadelphia has. And if Sanders can stay healthy, and he looked okay yesterday, running hard, got in the end zone. This Eagle team, right now, all the teams in the NFC East except Dallas won yesterday. Now the Giants are the Giants. The Commanders, not really sold on, but the Eagles, as of right now, from what I've seen yesterday, the Eagles will be my favorite, after 1 week to win the NFC East. Dolphins, Patriots, and we've talked a little bit earlier about, changing of the guard, and this is what we've seen here before. When the Dolphins fired their head coach back in the wintertime, I thought that was bullcrap. I thought that was a terrible call by the upper management for Miami, because what he has built, he handed down to the next guy, and the Dolphins proved that yesterday. Beating New England 20-7 in a game that really wasn't even close. It looks like their quarterback, Mac Jones, got hurt, some kind of a back injury. They say it was spasms, I was reading. So that's going to be a big problem. If he's out for any length of time, New England's going to struggle even more, because then I think you're looking at Bailey Zappi, who's a rookie from Western Kentucky, who I really like. but I don't know that he's ready to play, in the NFL just yet. Keep an eye on that if you're a Patriots fan. If Jones is out for any length of time, if it is more than back spasms, we're going to see the fall continue for New England. Ravens, Jets, and I guess there was at one point in this game where the Jets were chanting for Mike White to be on the field as opposed to Joe Flacco. Zach Wilson's still out with the injury. The Jets did not look good. The Ravens, it took them a minute. It took Lamar Jackson a minute to get warmed up, maybe knock out off some of that off-season rust. But once they got it rolling, it was kind of what we thought it was going to be. Ravens 24, Jets 9. Commanders 28, Jaguars 22, and this was a game that I thought Jacksonville had wrapped up, and then all of a sudden, here comes the Commanders. Jacksonville, I thought, played the better game. I watched a little bit of this game on Red Zone, but hats off, and a big fantasy hat tip to Antonio Gibson. He had a great day, 7 receptions, and he ran the ball well, didn't turn the ball over, and they're going to rely on him now until Robinson gets back, and we'll see what happens for them. But for the next couple of weeks, I'm a lot more confident rolling Antonio Gibson out there now in my fantasy lineups than I was yesterday. I started him in a few places. I benched him in a few places. I wasn't sure what we were going to get. But if we're going to get that from Antonio Gibson going forward, that's going to be good. And maybe his role stays that way even when Robinson comes back because he's producing and doing so well. Which, as fantasy enthusiasts, we hope so because, if you're anything like me, I got a lot of him in several places. The Browns were able to win a game with Baker Mayfield on the field. That's the only thing I can say at this point. Browns 26, Panthers 24. We got a lot to figure out in Carolina. They're going to take some gelling, I think, to get to. There were some times when I was watching parts of this game. Like I said, I don't watch every game. I just watch parts. I try to flip around and catch a little bit of everything on my Sunday ticket. But there were times in this game where I thought they needed to get McCaffrey involved a little bit more and utilize him a little bit more than they did. And I'm not sure that's Baker's game. It'll be interesting going forward to see what they do and how long McCaffrey, McCaffrey's a pro, and he's one of the, first-class guys in the league, and he might not say a word, but there might come a time when, he's saying, hey, get me more involved. And I don't have his stat line in front of me, but there were some times where, he would check down out of the backfield, and he's wide open, and Baker just doesn't go to him. And that could be problematic because that's where he can make a lot of positive yardage for Carolina. Get him an open space, make a guy miss, and then he does his thing. So I'm optimistic. I drafted him in our auction league. I paid a lot for him in our auction league. Banking on him staying healthy. I wasn't thinking, the usage was going to be a problem because I thought they were really going to lean on him if he's healthy. But we'll see how it goes. It's a new quarterback, and it might take some gelling. But hats off to the Browns with a backup quarterback, and not a whole lot in the receiving game. He overthrew Amari Cooper a couple of times, and they hung in there and scratched and clawed and was able to get a win for the first time on opening day in a while. They said so. Hats off to the Browns, and we'll see if they can keep it up. Brissett's going to have to be their guy until Watson gets off suspension. So, this is what we're going to see. I mean, Nick Chubb had a nice game. He had over 100 yards, didn't get in the end zone, but, they're going to lean on him and Hunt, and then maybe the passing game, blooms into a little bit of something. But right now, I'm thinking if you're Kevin Stefanski, we're featuring the running backs and kill some clock, get some wins. Colts, Texans, 20-20 in overtime. Nobody wanted to win this game. At the end, it was so crazy. And I can't remember if it was Houston or if it was Indy, but there was like 27 seconds left in the game or something like that, and one team punted. Like they were just giving up. Like, we know we can't do anything. We're not going to be able to get a Hail Mary, some kind of crazy wild play to get us into any kind of a field goal range. We have no time. We're just going to settle for the tie. I mean, a tie is better than a loss, but it was a little bizarre. It was like, well, this might be the lesser of all the evils, and, you know, we're taking the tie at this point, which was crazy. But the Colts, Jonathan Taylor had a good game. It took him a while to get going. And the theme for this evening's show is, you know, just rust. Player rust from our big-name players. You know, some play a little in preseason. Some play absolutely none in preseason, and it's hurting. But, I mean, it's to the point where, I mean, I know you don't want to risk injuring your guys. I get that. But then you get them into the regular season, and they struggle for 2 weeks because they're gassed and they're out of shape. And, you know, but, I mean, I guess if that's what you're willing to do, take a couple of losses until your team gets rolling, I mean, I guess that's one way to do it. You know, the Texans quietly played a really good game. I watched a little bit more of this game than I'd care to admit. Because I have a share of Jonathan Taylor, and I was wanted to see what he was doing, and I also have Brandon Cooks in a couple of leagues. So, you know, I said before that Brandon Cooks is very sneaky. He's a very solid, sneaky fantasy asset, and he had another good game yesterday. So like, Texans played a good game, and they played it good enough to win. I think both teams played good enough to win. Just neither one did. It was crazy, and it was almost two teams tying at the same time for the first time in NFL history, and also with the same score. That would have been crazy had not the Steelers pulled out the win against Cincinnati. Giants 21, Titans 20. Took the Giants a minute to get rolling, but I got to tell you, and I don't like any team in the NFC East other than the Cowboys. I loathe the other three. But you've got to give a hat tip to all three of those NFC East teams because they all scratched and clawed and found ways to win. Now, the best win out of the other three was Philly, I spoke earlier about. But you got to – I appreciate what the Giants did in staying in this game and fighting and clawing and getting a win at the end. New head coach, I think it's Brian Dable. He got his first win there in his opening day. And, you know, if they're trying to change the culture and get that team switched back around, you know, to a conference contender or a division contender and a conference contender and maybe even a playoff runs, that's where it starts. It starts with winning a game like this, a game that could have really went either way. You could have won. You could have lost. You found a way to win, and good for you. Good for you. On a day that we celebrated the 21st anniversary of 9/11, I think it was fitting that the Giants were able to pull off this win. It's something that we'll never forget, 9/11. I'll always remember where I was at that morning when all that went down. And for all who lost their lives in New York that day, you know, it's just something to look at and smile. So, you know, I say good for you, Giant. You've seen players wearing the FDNY hats and all that all across the league. So, you know, it was good for that win, and it was good for that team. I talked a little bit about Cincinnati earlier. I didn't speak too much about Pittsburgh. I want to say they played well enough to win. Should have been a bigger win. Because when Burrow throws 4 interceptions, you should be able to capitalize on those and end up doing more than you did. But I want to say something. They lost T.J. Watt, and it could be for the year. It looks like it's a pec issue, and if it's torn, then he's probably done for the season. If it's only partial, he's going to be out for a while. But that guy was raising havoc on Joe Burrow, like he has been doing for the past several years. So if the Steelers lose Watt to that pec injury, that's going to change the complexity of that defense, and they're really going to have to lean a little bit more on the offense because T.J. Watt was the heart and soul, maybe of the whole dang team, not just the defense. But, you know, the Steelers done enough to get the win in overtime in a division game, and a game that really means a lot to both franchises, teams, players, fans, everybody. Pittsburgh hates Cincinnati. Cincinnati hates Pittsburgh. That was a big win, even though it took forever for it to happen. Pittsburgh found what it took to win at the end, but hopefully, they didn't lose their team leader at the end of the day. Chiefs 44, Cardinals 21. This game was ugly. It was a mismatch. Mahomes 5 touchdown passes. They made it look easy. Sometimes it was so easy, and there was guys that just fell right in and picked up where Tyreek Hill left off. And Juju, I think, was going to have a big season there. I think he'll fit in nicely. Sky Moore looked good. The backup tight end, Jody Fortson, is a guy, if you're looking to stream tight ends or you're in 2 tight end leagues and you're looking for somebody, I've already put a couple of waivers in for that guy in a couple of leagues. And there's some leagues where, of course, he's already gone because guys are scavengers. But if you're looking for a tight end and you're in 2 tight end league or something, or a tight end premium, Jody Fortson may be a guy worth picking up if you're hurting for somebody and you need a tight end play, because they're going to use him. He's big and he's physical, and it's only a little bit of time before Kelsey may get dinged up, and then they have to go to him. He's up and coming, and that's a guy who I'm looking to target in a couple of leagues. Like I said, I put a couple of waivers in on him, and I'll stash him. I'll be interested to see, how he does going forward. All that being said, Patrick Mahomes is going to be just fine. I have one share of Patrick Mahomes throughout the course of my entire fantasy landscape, and he's going to win me some games this year. So, Clyde Edwards-Helaire looked good. It could be, I'm not still on that train yet, because I think Pacheco looked good as well. And I think Pacheco eventually will do some things to get more playing time. But if you had CEH in your lineup, he did well for you yesterday with a couple of touchdowns. Chargers 24, Raiders 19. This was kind of a little bit of a blah game. They did have some big plays. Devontae Adams had a big day, well over 100 yards, touchdown. He got to the end zone. And it's kind of what we thought it was going to be. I'm not really impressed with the running game, but I'm also not selling it all out just because it was the first game of the year. They were playing a high-octane offense in the Chargers, who, for all intents and purposes, they had a little bit of rust too. They didn't look fantastic. I called Mike Evans a very expensive decoy in one of my league chat rooms, because at the time I called him that. He had no catches. I think he ended up with 2 on the day. Very disappointing. You didn't get much from him. Keenan Allen got hurt. He left the game. Keep a close eye on what happens with him coming back, because now all of a sudden maybe you got some wide receiver issues for the Chargers' high-octane offense. Eckler was fine. Didn't do anything that I can remember off the top of my head fantasy-wise to blow you out of your seat, but did enough for the Chargers to get the win. And in that AFC West, I mean, let's face it, that may be the best division in all of the NFL. The quarterback plays fantastic. A lot of stud wide receivers there. I'm very, very interested to see how Denver looks tonight. I'm going to watch as much of that game as I can before I fall asleep. I cannot wait to see what Russell Wilson does in his debut against Seattle, his old team. But that division is going to be tough. It's been tough. I mean, if you look at it throughout the course of time, the AFC West, they hate each other. If you go back to when actually football players hated other football players, that's the division. You're talking Raiders versus the Chiefs. Nobody, if you're a Raiders fan, you can't stand the Chiefs and vice versa. And when the Chargers were up and coming, and now they've arrived, and you got 4 money quarterbacks in that division, it's a division to look out for, and whoever comes out on top of that division is definitely going to have earned it. And Very exciting. Very exciting if you're a fan of the AFC West or one of your teams is from the AFC West. A lot of good stuff coming from there for sure. One more game on the docket this evening. Like I said, Seattle, Denver. A lot of storylines here. The quarterback play for Seattle has me worried. I do have a couple shares of Lockett going throughout the course of my fantasy landscape, just because it's still Tyler Lockett and somebody has to catch the ball. I feel the same way about Metcalf. Last I heard, Geno Smith's still the starting quarterback, so he can chuck the ball down deep. So that may work out for Lockett and DK Metcalf. The running game, very excited to see how they run the ball in Seattle with Penny. I think Kenneth Walker's hurt. So very interested to see stat-wise and fantasy-wise how that unravels. For Denver, I want to see Russell Wilson come out and dominate his old team. He said it's just going to be just business. I don't know how it's just business, how you compartmentalize that after playing there for so long, Super Bowl with them, and how you can just go back into the very first game and do that. I don't know. It's going to be rough for him, even if he says it's not. But he's got Javonte Williams to lean on and Melvin Gordon to lean on and a couple of really good wide receivers, even though he did lose one to injury already. He's still got some weapons around him. He's got Albert Okwuegbunam at tight end, who I think is going to have a really good year. So a lot of good storylines. You got, not to mention, you got Troy Aikman and Joe Buck calling this game. This is their first game on Monday Night Football. So I'm looking forward to it. Can't wait for that one. Okay, we're almost done. We're almost out of here. Let's do some studs and duds. Weekly studs and duds. A couple of guys who crapped their pants this week. I said it before. Mike Williams, 2 receptions, very few yards. He was a decoy and a very expensive one to boot. My other duds is Dak Prescott / CeeDee Lamb. The whole entire thing right there is a dud. And now that Dak's hurt, I don't know how we're going to get that back on track. As Cowboy fans, I don't know how in the world they're going to right that ship. One game in, you got a whole season. You can't let his injury derail the whole entire season. So they got to figure something else out. The answer there is not Cooper Rush. Jimmy G, pick up his phone, call his agent, see if you can figure something out. Weekly studs. Number 1, obviously, Justin Jefferson, 9 catches, 184 yards, 2 touchdowns. The dude was running wide open across the field on multiple occasions. Like, they schemed it up, and he's just running all over the place. He could have had more. He could have had more catches and more yards. But they are going to have to find a way to get other people involved, because this is the NFL, and it's only a matter of time before they're able to find somebody that can lock him down, put a safety over top, and he doesn't do what he did. He blew up in week 1, and I'm all for it. There were so many to choose from, but I had to pick Saquon Barkley as my other stud for the week. Saquon, 169 yards, tacked on 6 more catches, got in the end zone. Not only was it good for us as fantasy enthusiasts who started Saquon Barkley, and I have 1 share of Saquon, and it paid off for me, but it was good for Saquon. He looked good. He ran good. He broke a 60-some yard run down the sideline, and he looked. I mean, he looks well. He's so physically imposing anyway. He's so strong and just put together, fantastically. And I'm rooting for this guy. It's terrible that he plays for the Giants, and I have to root against him because he's a Giant. But on this day, 169 yards, 6 catches, and he found the end zone, and they won on September 11th. I had to have him as one of my studs. Waiver wire. 3 names here for you to think about on your waiver wire. Okay, some of these guys may be available, some of them might not, depending on how deep your league is. I got this first guy in several leagues. I started him in several leagues just because he's the wide receiver too. Devin Duvernay for the Baltimore Ravens. Okay, lined up beside Rashad Bateman. Duvernay could have a fantastic year. He started off fantastic yesterday. Had 2 touchdowns. Put in a waiver claim for him. Drop some fab on him. Don't drop half your fab, but, drop a healthy $12 or $15 of your fab on him. And pick him up if he's available in places. Best ball, he'd be a steal in best ball leagues if you're in best ball dynasty or best ball where you can pick up and make moves. It would be great to have him in best ball. Jamal Williams for Detroit Lions. Now, DeAndre Swift had a fantastic game yesterday, but when they got down to the goal line, it was him. And I know he had 1 touchdown. It may have even been 2. I can't say for sure. I don't remember. I know for sure I saw the 1 touchdown, but in the leagues where if you're looking for something and you're in a pinch, he may be a fine flex play, and he might be a fine flex play throughout the course of the season, not just the matchups. But that's another one that I thought I seen yesterday. I thought, he's probably available in more leagues than he's not. This one I got question marks around. Jimmy Garoppolo, not only because I'm not sure how long a leash you're going to give Trey Lance. They said nothing specific, and he did play in a monsoon yesterday. But if Jimmy D's available, especially if you need him and he's in a 2-quarterback league or a super flex league, and he's available because he's a backup, go get him. And there's also the question marks of him maybe, and I don't know this for a fact. I'm not saying I don't have any inside information. Maybe he ends up getting traded to Dallas because Dak's hurt for 6 to 8 weeks. So he would be a guy that could stash on your roster right now, jump ahead of the game, and you have him. If it doesn't work out and Trey Lance takes off next week and Dallas brings in, Christian Ponder, I don't know, maybe they may talk Romo out of retirement to come back, then you just cut him. No harm, no foul. Don't drop a ton of fab on him. $2 or $3, maybe you pick him up and stash him on your roster. Drops. I'm going to give Cam Akers 1 more week. Okay? I don't know what I saw. I don't like what I saw. Okay? But that being said, if Singletary, or not Singletary, if Henderson's available, if Daryl Henderson's available, could put in a waiver claim for him. Never hurts. I'm not giving up on Akers yet, but in the couple carries that he had, wasn't good. Maybe it's because it was the defense, Super Bowl champions and everything. Maybe they were it was just gonna be Henderson's show. He couldn't get in and get in the groove. Buffalo's defense was, maybe it was a little bit too stifling. That's why I'm not giving up on him yet. I'm not starting him in absolutely no leagues will I start him until, he comes out and proves himself. So he's no longer a starting option for me. But if Henderson's available in your leagues, because we thought Akers was going to be the guy, go get him. Last one on the droppable meter. I don't think he's droppable, but I could certainly understand your frustration, especially with the way Philadelphia looked and all the attention that went to A.J. Brown. I could certainly understand if you need to make a roster move cutting Devonta Smith. I am not yet. I'm holding. This is where the overreaction part of the show needs to kick in. Do not overreact on some of these yet. Okay? So, as far as drops, I guess I'm not dropping anybody as of today. I just got them on high alert. I got them on, well, if this guy doesn't show up next week, maybe it is time. Now, it would be rough and really hard to swallow cutting Devonta Smith, especially when you probably got so much invested in him as far as draft capital or even, auction or whatever. So I'm not saying drop these guys. I'm just saying if they continue to throw up duds, you're going to need roster space, especially with injuries, bye weeks, and things of that nature. So by all means, don't cut them, but they're on drop alert. And I'm talking Cam Akers. I'm talking a Florida State Seminole who I will drop if need be. So I'm going to give him a little bit more time. I don't want to overreact just yet, but from what I saw, I don't like it. And I also don't like it in Philadelphia. If they're going to do all that and get A.J. Brown the ball, I think he had 10 catches for 150-some yards. I don't have it in front of me. But he had no catches and 4 or 5 targets, which I don't know if they were drops. I didn't see, but I'm going to give it some more time. but I didn't like it, and I threw up some goose eggs with a lot of these guys. Allen Robinson is my other guy, the last guy on my list on the drop-o-meter. Maybe keep it in the back of your mind. Okay, I thought personally he would have a little bit more of a role, considering they may try to slow down Cooper Kupp. And he, one catch, if I remember right, 11 yards, so the dude got you 2 points. So keep that one on your list. Keep it on your list, because I don't know what we got going on. It could just be a one wide receiver show, and Matthew Stafford just throws the ball to Cooper Kupp 20 times a game, and he catches 15 passes, because that's what seems to be working for the Rams. So I don't know. We got a long season to go. It's not time to overreact yet. Just react. I always say, I never lose in fantasy football. I either win or I learn. So what did I learn this week? I learned that I'm not rolling out Cam Akers. I'm not rolling out Allen Robinson. And I'd have to be in a real pinch to roll out Devonta Smith in week 2. I want to see how it plays out. So I either win or I learn. And I've learned a lot this week already in week 1. But I want to see it magnified and get my stuff straight and in a line before I start hacking up my team. I always give it 3 weeks. I give my teams 3 weeks before I make any kind of drastic moves. And that's kind of standard throughout the course of my fantasy history. I've always thought, well, week 1, it's crazy. Week 1's always crazy. Week 2, you kind of get an idea of what teams are working with. Week 3, you need to make your adjustments. Start making adjustments. Just don't do it yet. That's my tip. Be patient. Don't overreact. Because we are on to week 2. That'll do it for me. My name is Chris Strasbaugh. Thank you for listening to the Seahawks Blitz podcast. You can find my show wherever you find your podcast. Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Podbean, Google Pod, Apple Pod. Anywhere where the word pod's involved, you can find it. I appreciate the listens. I appreciate the mentions. Find me on Twitter at CGATBlitz. You can also find me on my personal Twitter at @yo_it's_CS. Thank you for listening. Hope you had a good week this week. I think I went somewhere in the neighborhood of 15-5, 14-6. I don't know just yet. Don't be close. Have a good week, and we'll see you next time on the Blitz.